Hello, I'm Pearl Jean Mabe, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Webinars are brought to you as a membership benefit of Heritage Ohio. Heritage Ohio's mission is to help people save the places that matter, build community, live better. Today, we'll have a presentation on Downtown Redevelopment Districts. In fact, Heritage Ohio worked with Representative Kirk Schuring to introduce and pass this legislation in 2016. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question or chat box at any time, and we will get to it at the end. Most issues with the webinar software will be solved if you close the program and restart it with the link that was sent to you. Our presenters today are David Robinson with Montrose Development Advisors and Mike Bowers with Darke County. With that, I will hand this over to Dave.
All right. Well, we are, we're very excited to be participating in this webinar and want to thank the folks at Heritage Ohio, not just for the chance to do the webinar, but for all the important work they do. We're going to talk today and kind of give a little update about the Ohio Downtown Redevelopment District program. It's still a toddler, but we thought it would be a good time to kind of update where we are and how we're doing with the program. So this is our agenda. We'll just give you a little bit of a background on us, the local community that's Versailles that we're going to talk about in detail, some of the DRD basics, and some of the lessons that we've learned out there. I'm not going to give you too long of a commercial. Our firm does economic development planning, corporate site location, project financing, and lobbying work. We're Columbus-based. We do work really all over the place. We've been very fortunate to help put together about a dozen downtown redevelopment district plans. So we've been kind of in the middle of this issue, but also done a lot of economic development planning for communities. We're doing a lot of project financing, have a lot of conversation about opportunity zones, and a lot of other exciting things. Mike, you want to give your Darke County commercial?
Sure, that'll be great. You say that you're Columbus-based, but I think Nate somewhat felt that he was Darke County-based there for a while because we had the good fortune to have Dave over here working on the Downtown Redevelopment District items, not only for the village of Versailles, but for the city of Greenville as well. So my group, the Darke County Economic Development, is a public-private partnership. Our oversight board is the Darke County Community Improvement Corporation. And with that, then we are funded as a public-private through a Partnering for Progress initiative that has been in place for about an 8-year window now. So again, and we've had the good fortune to be involved with Montrose Group on a couple different projects over in Darke County. So we work very hard to again look at new opportunities for Darke County businesses and our citizens. We're working right now. Business attraction is part of that, but workforce attraction is a bigger piece for us, and it's a community-wide business retention and expansion program. And we're, again, just working to grow jobs and capital investment through our business and retention program that we do through Business First. And we've got a great piece with our regional workforce partnerships, and we're involved with Dayton Development Coalition as our link to Jobs Ohio. So the downtown redevelopment piece, when it came out, just worked to be a nice addition of a tool in our tool belt that we could look and work to move things forward for our entire county.
Well, as Mike mentioned, my business partner, Nate Green, we usually divide and conquer on the work front, and I felt like he was living in Darke County for a while too, Mike. He was there a lot, but we certainly appreciated the chance to work with you and your team in that community. So let's kind of get into the world of Downtown Redevelopment District basis. Kind of the basics. It really is we think a fundamental economic development tool that can be used to promote historic preservation-based economic development. And, first question is, okay, well, what does that mean? Again, it's going to center on a certified historic structure. And, really in our experience, that's been anything from historic theaters to our classic historic county courthouses that are all over the state. We have a lot of historic municipal buildings, museums, office buildings. There's just a whole range of great historic structures in, really in towns big and small. So it's just a phenomenal asset that we have in really most of our communities out there. And it's just a kind of a critical tool. It's kind of a starting point really for the DRD program. When we look at doing a downtown redevelopment district process, we really think of it in and really what are just kind of a couple key steps. First is identifying the historic preservation certification or identification program. In essence, where's your historic structure? You have to have a building or a district that is a certified historic structure or district. It can be done at the local, state, or federal level, so it's not something that has to be on the National Registry, but it does have to be a certified historic structure that is built around. The second step is to really develop a DRD or Innovation District Economic Development Plan, and that's what we've done a lot of work around, and we'll talk a lot more about that. The third step is really, I would say, probably the most important step, and another thing that we do in the planning process is really developing the DRD financial model. It is really predicting and drawing a district that is going to really help you maximize the revenue that you're going to be able to generate to use in the Downtown Redevelopment District. If you meet some broadband tests, you have a chance to build a DRD Innovation District. And then finally, once you've got all the planning put together, this is action that actually municipalities have to take, that cities are going to have to adopt a DRD ordinance, and there's a public hearing and notice process that is kind of central to the overall effort. So again, as I mentioned, it all starts with that certified historic structure. And as Heritage Ohio works with a lot of communities that already have this and other communities looking at it, there's clearly a number of ways to get that DRD historic certification process. You can be on the National Registry of Historic Places, contributes to a National Register of Historic District. You get the National Park Service, which is obviously at the national level. Then you get the certified local government. And again, something that we always remind folks about is part of that certification process is it isn't just that you have an older, historically significant building, but your plan to redevelop the building has to be consistent with that historic nature. And that doesn't mean, you necessarily can't put on new windows or you can't look at making it energy efficient, but it's really not going to fly if your plan is just to tear the building off except for the front of it, and try and claim that it's still historically significant. So it is a critical piece. This is clearly one of them that if you if you're not able to have the certified historic site, your process is pretty much over at that point. That's the challenge. The good news is there's just a lot of certified historic sites all over the place. Again, a little bit more on this. We have over 4,000 Ohio structures and sites that are already listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. The state has over 60 local governments that have a local certification process in place. Question we get is, okay, how do we how do we know whether we have a chance at this historic certification process? And I apologize, I'm really simplifying this, but first of all, it's going to focus on properties that are at least 50 years and older. Of course, Mike, I'm over 50 now, so I don't think that's old at all. But it has to be at least 50 years and older. Does it still have the site's historical integrity? And is it significant in some way? Is it the architect that makes it significant? Was it the use? Is this a place George Washington slept? I mean, all sorts of things can make it historically significant. Again, more on this historic preservation criteria, that the property can be associated with events, with the life of a person, the architecture style, the high artistic value of the building, its history, and how close it is back to its original condition are all going to be big factors that play into this question of historic preservation. The next step is really to kind of look at doing the actual DRD economic development plan. And again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. The way we have helped communities or historic property owners do them is to identify, the historic structures in the area. In essence, what are the targets you have for redevelopment? To research potential project ideas around the historic structure. This is not, this program works best when you have someone that really has a real plan to go out and redevelop the structure. So the question is, if you've got a great historic theater, what's your plan to redevelop it? Who's going to do it? How much is it going to cost? What's the business plan to make it actually operate? It's all those critical questions that you need to look at, that will help a community look at. A third area is defining one or more DRDs up to 10 acres in a municipality. Really critical point. You can have more than one DRD in a community, and again, it just comes down to how many certified sites you have, how many 10-acre districts can you draw continuous to that historic structure, that are going to fit. So again, when we look at doing this, we look to try
a little bit.
Go ahead, Mike.
The city of Greenville has an historic downtown district. So from that, as the city of Greenville is looking at moving forward with the Downtown Redevelopment District, they're going to identify 9 DRDs, and a lot of it takes off from that historic structure. But we're fortunate that the local downtown was an historic district, of which those buildings that fit that criteria have been able to use that as a starting point. And it's also been nice, and I don't know that you've touched or hit the point, but the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be contiguous. So
right.
That's an important piece as we've moved things forward with the city of Greenville.
That's a great point. And Greenville we use as a model all the time to say, look, they've got a lot of historic structures, and they did a great job of finding ways to, really try and maximize the benefit of each one of the district. The next thing we'll look at is, does the site, does the district have the broadband speed that they need to qualify as an innovation district? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Identifying costs of the project, including the historic and non-historic building rehab and infrastructure. In essence, it's working with the client to say, look, what are your costs to try and address, that you need to do to redevelop this site. Developing funding models again. Mike mentioned that this notion of continuous and not contiguous. Continuous is you can use right of way, you can use roads, you can use anything you want to kind of connect properties to draw your 10-acre district. That's a lot easier to do than saying, no, it's got to be right connected to it. And then finally, outlining the local government process. So we'll do that in what we call the learn phase of our report. It's kind of the research oriented phase, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those a little bit later. The second phase when we do one of these DRDs reports is the listen phase. And this is really the second step to really listen to the community, the political, the business leadership, the public as to what they want to do, around that site. The elements of this will be anything from one-on-one interviews with community leaders or business owners, focus groups. We really like focus groups because, quite frankly, it kind of gets everyone in the community to air their issues in front of each other. And you can sometimes iron out challenges before they become challenges that way. Public surveys we think are a great tool where you can get some good public feedback. And then finally, doing public meetings to try and gather additional feedback from community leaders. And then the final piece of that DRD plan is the action plan. We describe, for all of our economic development planning efforts, we have this learn, listen, do model. Learn is, really research to understand who a community is. Listen is really about understanding who a community wants to be. And the do phase is really about, okay, how do we take what they are with what they want to be and create an action plan that gets them there? So it kind of keeps us grounded in reality, and it makes it a action plan that is clearly possible without, but at the same time pushes the envelope a little bit. So the typical elements, and this is a little bit different, for each one of these plans. Again, we're going to look at a land use and site development plan to determine the building, the operations, the infrastructure, the zoning specifics for that site. We're going to look and figure out the tax incentives and potential redevelopment charges that can help cover the building and operational and rehab costs. We're going to do industry market research and a marketing plan for the DRD. In essence, try and figure out what industry would be a good fit for a site. We'll, the math of these is that spreadsheet that really kind of outlines what would be the pilot payments and the redevelopment charge agreements. And the final piece is really something, quite frankly, we've learned from doing these. Most DRDs are simply not going to cover all the rehab costs just to the DRD. So we've figured out that we also really need to come up and look at other funding sources that can be a really effective tool and really kind of critical to make one of these DRDs actually work. So if you look at the DRD costs and the pilot funding and uses, again, it's the rehab of structures. DRDs can be used for that, either grants and loans. If it is a certified historic structure, you can spend grant money on it. That's why this program is exciting, because unlike tax increment financing, where you really can only spend it on public infrastructure, a DRD, you can use the money directly on the historic structure. You can do, you can do rehab of a non-historic structure through loans. You can fund SID, CICs, and not-for-profits organized for redevelopment purposes for up to 20% of the funds. You can do public infrastructure. Public infrastructure in this case is the same exact definition that's used for tax increment financing. And finally, you can do innovation districts to finance grants and loans to companies and other kind of technology-based economic developments. So those are really the sources those are the uses of the funding that you can do under the DRD program. So you really see with the historic structure, using the money on the historic structure, it's really kind of we think a very unique tool. So the financial model that we look at is really kind of outlined here. It's what are the building and operational costs? How do we kind of meet those costs with funding that's going to be provided by the DRD, with redevelopment charges from the DRD, with other public and private sector sources. So we try and make those, develop an analysis that makes those two areas meet. The DRD program has I think, accurately been portrayed as a super TIF. It is clearly modeled after the state TIF law. You've got, in essence, a tax exemption. It's really only on the gain in property tax that is, that's collected in that district. And then again, it is, you can also, like a TIF, you can do redevelopment charges. The property owners don't get a vote. It's something that the city passes, but if you do redevelopment charges, which in essence is an extra fee on top of the property tax gain in the DRD, you do have to get property owner approval for it. So this works exactly as it does with tax increment financing. So this slide just kind of spells it out in more detail, and we literally could take out DRD and put TIF, tax exemption, here, but that basically just illustrates that it's really about gaining the growth or increment in the property tax value. What does this tell you? This tells you that you have to have property tax increases, and in some parts of the state, that creates a challenge. The reality is, if you don't have an economic development project or a real estate project that's going to go on within that DRD, you may not have enough property tax growth to really make that work. The counter to that is, quite frankly, in a lot of the bigger urban centers in the state, with the millennials shifting to more of an urban housing model, and downtowns all over the U.S. becoming centers of residential development, multifamily development, you're seeing some very high growth in downtown office, property values. So, which of course drive up the property tax growth. So again, it's going to be a little bit different in a urban versus rural dynamic. Mention innovation districts. Really, what you have to have is 100 gigabits per second of high-speed broadband service. I spent a portion of my career working at Ameritech, the Baby Bell telephone company. I can tell you that 100 gigabits is a really fast broadband network, and really, in large part, that's going to be some sort of municipal broadband network or the state's ORNet network that you're really going to have. So if you're fortunate enough to have a state college or university in your community, you may well have a 100 gigabit broadband network flowing through your streets, and you may not even know it. It is, if you do, it's a great opportunity, because you can build a whole tech initiative with the DRD funds. You can use the money to actually help spur growth of technology-oriented companies. So it is from our perspective, a real important growth opportunity. This was kind of interesting, and Joyce and I were both involved in the original passage of the DRD bill with Representative Schering. For some strange reason, the original DRD law, as passed, did not permit DRDs, not only where there was a TIF, which makes sense because you can't capture the growth in property tax twice. Kind of have to have a TIF for DRD, but it also said if there ever was a TIF. And the effect of this was that really most developed areas in the state have TIFs all over the place. I think Franklin County here in Central Ohio has 200 plus TIF agreements on file with the state. So we were successful in getting Senate Bill, amendment added to Senate Bill 233 that would change that provision and would permit a DRD to happen even if a TIF had been in place at some point. So that is a really important distinction to understand. So you do your plan, you do your map, you do your financial model, you figure out if you can be an innovation district or not. Then you got to pass an ordinance. And again, the ordinance is going to have the area that's included in the district, the number of years, the plan, the territory, the designation of innovation district or not, establishment of a special fund, again, much like a TIF, and create a mechanism to file the annual report. There's a public hearing requirement and a notice requirement to each of the property owners in the district. So again, literally right out of the TIF statute, but that's kind of the procedural efforts that have to be done as part of the enactment of the DRD once you have the plan done. Then you got the agreements, of course, and again, modeled exactly off the TIF law. You'll have DRD payment in lieu of taxes and other revenue sharing agreements. Could be done with the school district, could be done with local governments. You could have DRD redevelopment charge agreements. It could be between the local property owners and the municipalities. Again, going to be tied in with redevelopment charges with the county auditor's office, and could be plugged into the lease rate. And then other funding agreements that may be part of it, whether it's Jobs Ohio, the state's historic preservation tax credit program, the new market tax credit program, and finally the state capital bill. And then you get all that great work done, and you get to file your annual report, again, just like a TIF, with the state development services agency. It's just going to map out, really what you did with the, with the DRD that year. So we would tell you that we have completed Downtown Redevelopment District plans for these communities, and they're all kind of in varying stages of being developed. It's kind of interesting. I think it started out in the smaller communities. I think it's going to move to the bigger communities now that the TIF law change has been put into effect. But there clearly are communities out there that are active and have been kind of working on the DRD program. Again, I'd say, Mike, do you want to kind of jump in here?
Sure. And I think part of what we learned, the lesson from Montrose Group was your strategy of the learn, listen, and do. And critical because as we were working through, and we'll talk a little bit about Versailles and how they've moved theirs forward, because theirs is in place. The legislation has been passed by the village, and really was a matter of working together. So when you look at how that piece, again, came into play, the listen part was a critical piece, and also critical for the city of Greenville as they are moving theirs forward. And I believe the city of Greenville is having their public hearing in January. So by March, theirs should be in place. But it really was a matter of working together. Communication is critical. The nice part of that was Village of Versailles was able to get a 30-year agreement. I believe, you've talked about that it's 10 years without school district approval, can be up to 30 years. And Village of Versailles, in working with their school board, was able to get a 30-year agreement in place. So again, that model that you have out there of the learn, listen, do is a critical piece, and well put together. And again, you're with Montrose Group helping walk through that for us over here has been just a blessing to get this to where it's at for the two municipalities that are in Darke County that are making use of this. So site analysis, again, Village of Versailles had one historic piece in play, so that will put their part to the single 10-acre parcel. Again, the city of Greenville is able to look at 9 units for a DRD because of that. and working through all the revenue opportunities and options has been a good piece on both sides, and the action steps as it moves forward, pretty well self-explanatory as you, again, follow the method and follow the process through. So when you look at the demographic, again, Darke County is 53,000 folks. City of Greenville is the main piece in the community. It's the county seat, 13,000 folks. Versailles is 2,700 folks, and they've got a nice little saying, people, pride, and progress. So the DRD part has fallen directly into line with what the village has said, because it's progress and it's another tool in the tool belt and it moves things forward. We are an older community or an older county here in West Central Ohio. So when you look at the population growth or lack of, again, it gives us an opportunity to look at some things, how we can move things forward, how we can turn that needle to be a positive thing as we look to the future.
You know, Mike, and I think that's a great point that I just want to dwell on for a second. First of all, the rural communities all over the United States have been, losing population for years, for decades. And, we just did a competitive report for the state and kind of took a whole broad, economic, read on the state as a whole. And, we kind of tallied up and identified about 69 rural counties in the state. And in the last 5 years, they've lost 40,000 people. Columbus has gained 50,000 people, the city, and the state as a whole has only gained 12. So what you're seeing in this data from Darke County really is consistent with what we've seen other places. But the DRD is a tool to combat that. But I'm sorry to jump in, but I just wanted to kind of add to
that. No, and that was the beauty of that, because that not only helps, obviously Greenville is the county seat, but Versailles, and again, when they say people, pride, and progress, they're forever looking forward and seeing how they can do things better. Obviously, agriculture is a big piece of our local economy, but we're very fortunate to, especially in Versailles, have a company like a Midmark who's very proactive and looking forward and seeing how they can assist in those areas. So they just announced a $42 million tech center that's broken ground now. And so, again, that will help as they look at moving things forward and how they look at that workforce attraction model and how we can, again, attract people to Darke County.
That's great.
So, and with that, obviously, Versailles is a net importer of jobs as you look at this slide. King's Command is another company over there that is a growing company. Obviously, Midmark's a growing company. So from that perspective, and then the next slide shows you a little bit of the location quotient and the area that, as we said, agriculture is king. Shows the other areas. We do have a nice mix of manufacturing in the county, and especially in that Versailles and in the Greenville markets.
Well, and just so folks understand that this location quotient, anything above 1 is a measure of economic strength. This is all based upon federal occupational data. It's basically, what workers you have in a region. It's not unusual for smaller regions to have really high numbers in some areas, because in a small community, all it takes is one really big employer to kind of throw that up. But you can see, numbers in the 4 and 5 range are really off the charts. So you see how strong this community still is in the world of manufacturing and agriculture.
Yeah, when you look at Versailles, obviously, as we said, agriculture is king. We have Weaver Eggs, who's a top 10 egg producer in the country, And then you've got companies like Pole Transportation, Levy Transportation, Classic Carriers, A.L. Smith. Transportation is also a critical component for us. So all those together, you can see those location quotients really hit those areas of manufacturing, transportation, and agriculture for, again,
Right.
for sales as well as Darke County. And that just
And again, I think. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Mike, go ahead. That's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, this just shows some of the employers for the Versailles area. Again, you see logistics and transportation are big players. Manufacturing, they've got a very nice manufacturing mix. And then, as we said, agriculture. Government plays a piece. Service organizations play a piece. So we've, again, a very nice mix for a rural community. So when we looked at, or excuse me, when the village looked at that Downtown Redevelopment District, Versailles jumped on that immediately because they were looking at, you know, how can we move some things forward? How do we look at through the local economy? So it's a revitalization of Versailles through that historic preservation financing, the DRD, and the historic tax credits. We've got some folks that are looking at taking some buildings and really moving that forward. So that then in turn promotes entrepreneurship with a community investment fund. So it really fit all the parameters that the Village of Versailles was looking at because of the growth model that they've shown through their manufacturing and agriculture and transportation. But again, they had some areas in the community that they felt fit that DRD outline, and again, working through that whole process, they've been able to identify some opportunities, which again, that entrepreneurship is a critical component because you're really looking at how you can engage the next generation and the opportunities and ideas. So, you know, there's been about a half dozen small companies that have taken that entrepreneurship model, and now with having a couple buildings that they can look at growing. You know, Dave, you mentioned also about the upper floors of some buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Create apartments or to create living spaces for folks. That's the next step that the Village of Versailles is also looking at, as well as the City of Greenville, because it's just, again, a great opportunity when you've got a very vibrant and a very active downtown. So far, we've really looked at the first floor and the retail opportunities, but when you look at the second floor and the opportunities for, again, some business development up there, but for living spaces, and it really just, it fits well with what the millennials and the next generation are looking at.
Right. Right.
And this just shows a quick little map of Versailles and the area that is being decided to move forward with that Downtown Redevelopment District.
And again, this just kind of illustrates the parcel by parcel analysis that we'll go through and do. And you know, the art of this is in a lot of places to find the tax producing parcels that are not exempt through abatements or TIFs, and also that are for profit, based in for profit uses. So it's not government, it's not not for profit hospitals, it's not universities. So that's really kind of the effort we do when we go through kind of do the parcel analysis.
Yeah, and then the uses of funds again hits everything that the Village of Versailles was looking at to move things forward. And again, some of that, as you look, that's that learn, listen, do model that you have touched on, but it is really a communication piece with the community as a whole. It's identifying those groups that are looking to to make use of the DRD and what those uses of funds can be. And, you know, for the Village of Versailles, being able to capture that 30-year window is kind of a nicety, because a lot of folks, I believe the city of Greenville is going to do the 10-year model to start with, and they'll look at that from there. But that 30-year model and locking it in, I think the village and the community, through that listening phase and then moving that forward, really learned a lot to say, this is, again, a very nice tool in our tool belt that we can really see what the advantages will be and how those uses of funds will really build on themselves in that 30-year window. And then you've got you just show the incremental financing and what the things can, with the new assessed value, new taxes, and that, and again, just falls into what Dave was talking about over the length of time and over a 30-year window, value of that DRD and helping the community plan for future growth and future development.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is the crux of the numbers. This is what the map really turns into, and illustrates that obviously the more investment you have in the district, the more increased assessed value you're going to have, the new taxes, and then based upon that percentage that you get from the DRD, you're able to put that into a substantial pot of money into the DRD.
Yeah, as you look at current market value of the area that is put out there, and just those numbers as they go through the planned investments, right now the village is looking at putting in a Casey's General Store. As we talked about the second floor residential, you've got a mid-mark that in collaboration with local building owners and local businesses is really seeing what the advantage of that might be and how they can attract, again, that next generation into things. And it's been a nicety that's just gone into play, is a microbrewery is in play in Versailles, to the point that I think they've been open for 6 to 7 months now, and they're already looking at growing their business and growing into a bigger footprint, which again is a nicety for that downtown district and that downtown area. They will definitely be taking advantage of that Downtown Redevelopment District and that uses of funds that we showed earlier. So
yeah, and again, nothing like a microbrewery to draw in the millennials.
Well, and it's we've got opportunities there, and it's just what is a draw and what's an attraction, and again, putting an opportunity out there for a young entrepreneur that saw the value of rehabbing a building and what a need or what a want was, again, through the listening phase. And then he really took it to heart, and he did the do, as it were.
That's great.
And then when you see the action steps of the Downtown Redevelopment District piece, Versailles has the legislation in place. They've done all those pieces, and again, as things move forward, they'll be able to utilize the historic preservation tax credit as they look at rehabbing a couple of the buildings that are in that district. So again, it worked out to be a very nice plan for the village. And as the city of Greenville moves theirs forward, it will be a very nice plan for the city of Greenville to do some of the same things. Again, Village of Versailles has a single 10-acre piece. The nice thing for the city of Greenville is, because of the historic downtown district and other historic buildings, they're going to be able to make use of 9 DRD districts in that regard.
So again, I think that, and Mike, don't hesitate to, to jump in here from the lessons you all have seen in Darke County. But as I mentioned before, planned investments in a DRD are not critical in larger urban markets. The property values are just, quite frankly, they're rising to begin with. So it is it's a critical piece. Rural markets, you probably are going to need some level of planned investment to really kind of push the property values up enough to make the DRD a viable tool. You have to look out for the TIFs and tax abatements that are already out there. It doesn't do you any good to include those parcels in your area. Clearly, historic preservation can drive economic growth, but and I think the other part is, DRD funding is rarely enough, and that you really have to find ways to get other get access to other programs that are out there. So again, this is the
with that lesson learned part. I would make sure that folks, as they're listening to this, you were talking about making sure they look out for that TIF and tax abatement piece, but don't just rely on that. Don't be afraid to look at a DRD as an option and as a tool for future growth, because again, that's a 30-year window, depending on your conversation and what you can get worked out with your school district. But don't be afraid of that. Work with Montrose Group to again put that out there, and again just take a look at it and see where that falls into what you're looking at and the different growth models that you've got. Especially for us in a rural area, we need to look at all avenues, whether it is the tax abatement, the TIF, the Downtown Redevelopment District. It is that planned growth, and it's being forward thinking. And we've been fortunate, again, for Versailles to be a very forward-looking community, and not being afraid to see what other opportunities are out there through, as we're talking about the Downtown Redevelopment District.
Well, and the other thing I would say, and I think Mike would echo this, is that you don't fully know what your projects are until you get everyone in the room and start talking about it. I can't tell you the number of times that we've done an economic development plan, whether it's a DRD or another one, that you start to get the community engaged in a discussion, and all of a sudden a property owner shows up and says, wow, I really didn't even know you cared about developing this area. I've owned these 3 buildings, and I've really been thinking about investing in them and trying to turn them into housing or turn them into an office. So a lot of times just starting the discussion creates some unusual interest.
Well, and like you said, when you get everybody in the room, somebody that's been an owner of a building that's, had those 3 buildings, like you said, that suddenly goes, hey, there's some opportunity here that I maybe didn't think of before I attended this meeting or sat down with some other folks. And again, it is that
right.
The community really does care about what we're doing and how we're going to move things forward. So again, those are critical and very important pieces.
Right. This slide illustrates, and this is just Columbus, and I think if we did the same thing for Cleveland or Cincinnati or other growing, mid-sized urban markets, you'd see the same. You're just seeing substantial growths in assessed value of property downtown, and it everywhere we look, it's we probably early last year we fully recovered from the financial services collapse, the recession from a property value standpoint, and now we're moving in a pretty high direction up. Again, this is navigating the world of tax incentive acronyms, the TIFs, the enterprise zones, the CRAs. You also can't forget that you can remove parcels from a TIF, from an enterprise zone, or from a CRA. Now, the CRA caveat I give you is that becomes harder to do if it's a pre-1994 CRA, because you can only amend that twice. So broader pre-94 CRAs are tougher to deal with from a DRD standpoint. Historic preservation, I mean, the numbers are very clear, whether you look at it nationally or at the state. You know, historic preservation economic development is good business. The investment in the tax credit has been substantial, and we think the DRD will just help reinforce that. It's not all part. DRDs aren't the only financing, you know, strategy that's out there. Again, that's just a partial list. Joyce actually had Nate Green and I talk at our annual meeting about the Dirty Dozen list of financing programs that you can use for development projects, and that's just a slide that kind of summarizes those. Well, I wanted to kind of get to the questions part. I hate these webinars where the guys talk the whole time and don't leave any room for questions. So, Earl, do you want to jump in there?
Yep. All right. So we already have a few questions to answer. I just want to remind everybody, if you do have a question, to type it into the question box at this time, and we'll get to it. So, first question. Is a DRD required to have an innovation district?
Yes. You cannot have an innovation district without having a downtown redevelopment district. So you have to have the certified historic structure. Can you hear me?
Dave, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Pearl.
Where's the
Can you hear me?
people? You know where it says Dave's on.
Pearl, I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I heard both of you, so.
Pearl, can you hear me?
Well, I'm not sure what's happening, but I can no longer hear David or Mike.
Dave, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, Mike.
Now I do.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. Hello?
All right.
Okay,
Well, that
so
was exciting.
did you guys hear
There's
the question,
always
or-
a technical issue. Yeah,
Okay.
I would answer the question. You have to have a DRD to do an innovation district. You have to have a certified historic structure, and you have to have a DRD economic development plan plus the 100 gigabit of broadband service. There's no ability to do an independent innovation district.
Okay, next question. So how does the DRD interact with community entertainment districts?
I'm not sure they are related. I think you could probably do both. I think you probably could do a community entertainment district, you know, in compliance with that, you know, with that new law, but I'm not aware that it was designed to, you know, be required to use, you know, to have a DRD.
Okay, so the next question, if you exceed 10 years, do other taxing districts, in addition to the schools, garner revenue?
That is really up to the agreement that you negotiate. All the law says that if you go longer than 10 years with your DRD, you have to get school district approval to do it. It's also important to note that you can only gain 70% of the new revenues. So all the folks that benefit from the growth in the property tax are going to benefit from at least that 30% of that growth. So there is the statute really does not say anything about what goes on with those local communities. That will really be a decision between you know, really what the municipality how it wants to set it up.
Okay, next question. What additional benefits do an innovation district provide beyond the DRD?
Well, it really comes down to using the DRD revenue to help finance tech-based economic development effort. You know, loans and grants to high-tech startups. Maybe it means a that historic structure becomes a tech incubator. You know, a whole range of different things you could do, you know, with that funding.
And then could you explain timeframes a little more? For instance, 10-year model versus 30-year model and so on.
Well, I think as Mike pointed out, you know, he's had two different communities, you know, in his county go through this process. I think one looked at a 30-year model and one looked at a 10. I mean, from a political standpoint, if you don't think the school district is going to agree to the DRD for whatever reason, most municipalities, if they want to do the DRD, would do a 10-year model, so they don't have to get school district approval. If they had larger financial needs for the DRD and felt that they really needed that money, or they had a really good relationship with you know, with the school's leadership, then they probably will go look to do a 30-year agreement for the downtown, you know, with the school board.
Yeah, and just as an FYI, on the 30-year model, it's not the 70% through working with the Versailles School and the Versailles administration. To get to that 30-year model, I think they put the amount at 50%.
Right,
So
right.
That was just
Again,
negotiated piece.
Just like a TIF, you know, I mean, the law tells you what the maximum can be, but that doesn't mean that you do that. You could have payments made, you know, to support that, you know, to support the schools, you know, through a variety of different means.
Okay, next question. What economic development organization receives funding from the Versailles DRD?
I'm not sure there is an I mean, is it the yeah, I mean, it's just the city, right? Right, Mike?
Correct. But they're putting it, they've got their committee that is set up that will oversee that. But yeah, the village will basically oversee those funds, and they will have a committee that will review the uses of those funds.
Okay, next question. Can you give us an example of planned investment? What are you referring to when you say that?
Well, I think Mike touched a lot of them as to what, you know, what they're looking at in for sales. You know, you've got what Midmark's looking at. It could be a company that wants to develop, you know, a building within the DRD. It could be, I think, a great target for these DRDs are the historic theaters. You know, we have historic theaters all over the state. You know, really those are at least, you know, residential. There's a lot of residential discussion going on. Again, that Mike talked about, that second story residential strategy that's, you know, that's clearly out there. So I think that's at least, you know, a list of what we've seen.
Okay, and next question. Did I hear correctly that a single historic building on the National Register meets the requirement for multiple DRDs? Also, can parcels in a single district be entirely non-contiguous?
You need, if you're going to do multiple DRDs, you need multiple buildings, multiple certified historic structures or districts.
And then also, can
we were
parcels?
Fortunate that, as Greenville was looking at it, they have an historic district, so they were able to use one of their historic buildings to use for a 10-acre parcel, and they were able to use a couple of the historic buildings in that historic district to move out that 10-acre piece.
Gotcha. And then also, can parcels in a single district be entirely non-contiguous?
They don't have to be. They have to be connected in some way, but they can be connected by public right-of-way or roads or railroad. You know, so.
Okay. And then are there examples of DRDs that coincide with special improvement districts? If so, how have property owners reacted?
Hold on, let me. You know, again, you certainly could do a special improvement district and a DRD. A special improvement district is a voted assessment from property owners. It's not property tax. So you clearly could do, you know, a SID and a DRD, so that is clearly possible. I'm not sure if I know of a community that's done both a SID and a DRD, but I don't know anything that would stop it from happening.
Okay, and how much do you charge a community for this? Does Montrose set up the payment, financial tracking, or is that the auditor's responsibility? If so, so if a community is considering a SID or bid, should they do a DRD? I guess they're getting at, they want to know how you would be a part of this process, and obviously they can contact you later for pricing, I assume. But go right ahead and answer that.
Our fees are, you know, based upon the scope of work that we do. They're normally set fees for the DRD plan, and you know, again, kind of we also can set up an ongoing relationship to help implement it that generally would be hourly. You know, so asking if you would, you know, do a SID or a DRD, I mean, I don't know why doing a DRD would stop you from doing a SID. The DRD does not cost anyone any money. It captures future property tax growth. The property owner has to pay the property tax anyway. The SID is a special assessment that they have to agree to pay, in essence, through a little mini election.
All right. So I think I have one or two more questions. Oh, just one. Besides being a historic structure or located within a historic district, are there other minimum requirements in order to set up a DRD?
You know, it is you have to have a certified historic structure. You have to have a plan to invest in that historic structure. And you have to have a Downtown Redevelopment District plan. And other than that, I'm not sure what other requirements you have to have.
I think wrap it up.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, which it does not appear that there are, so if you have any little lingering questions, do type them in right now and I'll try to get to them. But with that, I would like to thank everyone for attending the webinar today. And I would also like to thank David and Mike for the presentation. Thank you, guys. And our next webinar will be Wednesday, January 9th at 1 p.m. Roger Loomis with the City of Newark will be presenting on how the city leveraged a sewer separation project to revitalize the downtown. Registration for that webinar is open on Heritage Ohio's website at heritageohio.org. Well, and with that, I think we are out of questions and there are no more coming in. So everyone have a great day and a great holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.